Good afternoon, everyone. My name is James Leckie. I'm the college coordinator for the American College of Radiation Oncology. Today we are having a new practitioner webinar on the ABR Maintenance of Certification program on some improvements that are on the horizon. We've got two great speakers today, Dr. Paul Wallner and Dr. Lisa Kachnic. Both of them are of the ABR. Dr. Wallner is currently the Senior Vice President of 21st Century Oncology, and he's responsible for the legislative and regulatory affairs, organizational, vendor, medical school, and medical staff relationships for 21st Century. And previously, his posts have included the Chief of the Clinical Radiation Oncology Branch of the Radiation Research Program at the NCI and Vice Chair of the Radiation Oncology Department of the University of Pennsylvania. And he currently serves as the Associate Executive Director for Radiation Oncology of the ABR. Dr. Lisa Kachnic is Chair of Radiation Oncology at Vanderbilt University with prior posts at Boston University and Massachusetts General Hospital. She specializes in gastrointestinal malignancies, serving as the chair of the GI Radiation Oncology for SWOG and the Radiation Oncology GI Trustee for the ABR. Recently, she's been named Executive Officer and President-elect of the American Board of Radiology. So what we're going to do, we're going to get started, but just wanted to let you all know, while you're all muted, you can submit questions throughout the webinar by going down to the chat section and sending questions to staff. At the last 10 minutes, I'll open questions and I'll read them out to Drs. Wallner and Kachnic one by one and answer them as best we can. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Drs. Wallner and Kachnic.
Thank you very much, James. First, before we begin, I've got some significant disclosures. One of us has a lifetime certificate, so is technically grandfathered in, if you will. I'm not going to say who that is. I'll leave that up to you to decide. But both of us, Dr. Kachnic and I, are active participants in maintenance of certification. Neither one of us find it an onerous task, and we both believe that it really is critical that we continue and are active in that participation. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a few moments. I'm going to start for a few minutes to give you a little bit of background of the Maintenance of Certification program, why we initiated it in the ABR, and then Dr. Kachnic is going to take over and discuss with you some really exciting changes in the program that we think are much more user-friendly and will be very appreciated by diplomates of the ABR. Just to give you a little bit of recent history and how we got to this point, in 1998, Dr. David Narwhal, who was a distinguished, or is a distinguished surgical educator, became a member of the American Board of Medical Specialties Executive Committee. At that time, it was the practice of the ABMS Executive Committee that new members should submit a white paper related to one of the member boards or the ABMS educational mission. And Dr. Narwhal's white paper really related to this issue of the obligation to assure the public that their doctors remained competent, and the premise that certification at the time of completion of a residency was certainly not an assurance of that certification. Following the publication and discussion dialogue of Dr. Narwhal's comments, the ABMS began a task force on competence that ultimately led in 2002 to the 24 member boards agreeing on maintenance of certification and its current elements. And all 24 of the member boards have effectively exactly the same program and elements. The ABR mission is essentially the same as those of the other member boards, to certify that our diplomates demonstrate the requisite knowledge, skill, and understanding of their disciplines to the benefit of patients. Now, if you read that carefully and you understand the implication of that, the implication is that it's a lifelong process, not that it's a one-time, one-off process at the completion of a residency. And I'll go into some of the reasons why that is the case. In the past, an individual could sit for the boards once or twice, never take them again, and for the next 30 or 40 years suggest that they were board eligible or eligible for initial certification, despite the fact that the ABR had no relationship to them, no contact with them, And this was similar for all the other member boards, and that's all changed at this point in time. So what we've seen now is a paradigm shift in the board certification issues and processes. We've moved away, and we still do, knowledge and skill review at the completion of residency training for initial certification, but the paradigm shift really has been to review knowledge and competency throughout the life of an individual's career, which can be 30, 40, or more years. We have radiation oncologists who are practicing into their 80s and early 90s still. So the board now will look to maintain knowledge and competency throughout the life of an individual's career. We think that maintenance of certification is really a comprehensive approach to physician accountability, and I'll talk about that in a moment, the issue of accountability. But the patient's voice is integrated into the program, and the ABMS now has public members of the ABMS board who are not physicians and who speak essentially for the public, and we have some control over the programs through Congress and through other federal agencies. This still holds us accountable, though, for self-regulation. We are very proud of our position of self-regulation, and we're very protective of that, and we think to some degree that strong maintenance of certification programming does protect that element of self-regulation for medical practices. It supports transparency. The public now has access to a lot of this information. We've added now some of the core competencies to the program: patient safety, communication skills, professionalism, knowledge and cognitive skills, and certainly quality improvement have all been added to programming under the maintenance of certification programs, which were really not present previously. Why should anyone participate in maintenance of certification, and who does participate? Well, diplomates with time-limited certificates, so those after 1995, are automatically enrolled. When they get their initial certification letters that they've passed their oral examinations and certification examinations, they get a letter that indicates next steps, and the next step automatically enrolls them in maintenance of certification. Diplomates who hold lifetime certificates, or what we would consider non-time limited certificates, have to voluntarily enroll. And what we've seen, and it's very gratifying, is that more and more individuals who have lifetime certificates are beginning to enroll voluntarily in the maintenance of certification processes. But we will stress that they would not lose their lifetime certificates. Even if they have some problem with maintenance of certification, they will still have their lifetime certificate. If individuals have lifetime certificates and elect not to participate in maintenance of certification, the ABMS public reporting site will indicate that they are not reporting or not participating in maintenance of certification, but it will also indicate that they are not required to participate in maintenance of certification. So it will have that qualification that covers them. At this point in time, there are about 5,200 active diplomates. We can't keep a day-to-day list of that because people retire or regrettably die, but we expect at this time that about 3,100 of those diplomates are enrolled in maintenance of certification. So approximately 60% of our active diplomates are in maintenance of certification. And what we see is that as you would expect, the percentage, the ratio involved in MOC increases day by day and month by month as older individuals retire or die. I'm going to ask Dr. Kachnic now to take over to talk about some of the new exciting changes in the maintenance of certification program.
So just to remind everyone, this is not the exciting stuff yet, of the 4 components of maintenance of certification. The first one is having an active license. The second one are the self-assessments, and I'll review that a little bit. The third one is that exam we've been taking every 10 years, and that we have a lot of exciting changes coming in that. And the fourth component is the practice performance assessment, which we made some great changes over the past year, and I'll review those as well. So again, part one is basically you have a valid and unrestricted license in the state that you practice. And we have a little bit exciting news on our website, which we continue to try to make more user-friendly. Previously, you had to provide documentation, but now, since last January, you basically have to attest kind of yes or no, and I'll show you what that looks like on your MyABR dashboard in some subsequent slides. Oh, well, here we go. So here's your simple attestation, and this is actually the dashboard for our executive director, Val Jackson, although I don't think her name is on this one, and she's a diagnostic radiologist by day, and by night she's our executive director. And here's our dashboard so you can see what it looks like, and on this slide it goes through parts 1 through 4. And basically you will go through each one and attest yes or no, and when you attest yes, it turns green, and the no obviously will remain red. So the part 2 of our maintenance of certification, it has been the lifelong learning and self-assessments. And what this is, over a 3-year period, you need 75 CME credits, and a minimum of 25 of these 75 need to be those self-assessments, which could be what we used to call SAMs, or now more frequently folks do the journal self-assessments, and I'll show you where they are on our ASTRO dashboard in a second. And again, previously we had to put all of this documentation into MyABR, but now you can just attest yes or no. That said, you do need to keep an accurate log of what you do for many reasons, including your licensure, probably for hospital credentialing, but more importantly, we do audit about 10% of our maintenance of certification Diplomate, so you need to keep a log of it. That said, you could actually still go on your MyABR site and pull off what you previously had to put in to start on your Excel spreadsheet. And if you do most of your stuff through ASTRO, they also keep a record of it, which still kind of feeds into our system for that kind of green or red. So for instance, if for some reason through ASTRO, which might be hard to do, but who knows, you've done over 75 CMEs over 3 years, or 25 in 1 year, and over the 3 years you did 25 self-assessments, or 8 in 1 year. If you did everything through ASTRO, which still feeds to our website, you wouldn't even have to attest to the yes green because it'll already be there for you. And in the future, you know, we'll still try to make sure we add lots more self-assessment items that you can perform, and that probably will be a greater emphasis on patient safety and things that are more relevant to our practice, such as changes of standards of care, ASTRO consensus statements with self-assessments in the journal. And we'll also try to partner a bit better in the future with our other ABMS member boards, as well as AAMC, to have a central repository of activities. So if you go to your ASTRO website, and this potentially could have been mine when I made this slide a few years back, if you go to educational resources, you can see right here a selection of things. So one of them is, okay, I can look up my maintenance of certification log through ASTRO. I can see what online SAMs they have, which are typically parts of refresher courses and things of that nature. But what I actually love to do are the journal self-assessments, and I do it as part of Journal Club with my department. So thinking I need about 8 of these a year, and summers are generally harder to do things in because people are away. We try to do 8 of these through our regular monthly journal clubs, kind of through the non-summer months. and we make it fun. Usually one person is kind of responsible, and then we'll kind of do questions together, which perhaps isn't the intention, but it's okay. We make it more like a Jeopardy competition, and it's still what I consider continual learning. So that's a great way to do it. I have to say, I just took my MOC exam this past year, and I actually used some of these journal self-assessment articles to review quickly from, and there are some great ones. The one that actually helped me the most was sort of a lymphoma review, and it was quite topical for all of the sort of general walking knowledge, maintenance of certification questions in lymphoma that I had on the exam. All right, off to part 3. So here we get to talk about our exciting changes that are coming. So this is the cognitive expertise, or what some people might call the dreaded every 10-year exam. And previously, while we still took the exam every 10 years, it had 200 items. It was a secure exam. I actually, when I first took it, I had to go to Tucson to take it there, but since then we now give it at the Pearson VUE and similar test centers. More recently, we changed the exam so that you had a choice to take some questions based on what you actually do in practice, so to make the exam more relevant to you. And it still had 200 items, but we were allowed now to choose 2 modules or 60 questions of these 200 pretty general items based on what we do. So for instance, when I took the exam the past year and signed up for it on the My ABR website, I picked that I was going to do 2 GI modules, and then I registered for the exam and took 2 GI modules. So these are kind of how the exam has been, but now I'll go through some of the exciting changes up and coming. So why did we all think about changing the exam to something that might be more continual or relevant to us? And this is why, because there's contrasting philosophies on how we should be examined. So view 1 is the role of our part 3 is to provide a high-stakes pass-fail threshold that physicians must meet so we can maintain certification. But view 2 is really to provide an objective measure of physician knowledge and cognitive skills to inform continuing professional development and performance improvement, which one would argue would be the more relevant view. That, and as well as some Diplomate concerns that we noted on surveys that we do, as well as when we go discuss maintenance certification at various radiation oncology meetings throughout the year, we found that the Diplomates did not like the every 10-year exam because it was high risk, high stakes. Some felt, especially before we put the availability of doing practice specialized modules in, that it wasn't as relevant. There was a cost to it, not only an actual cost to go take your exam at a Pearson VUE center, but also for missing work. And where was the supporting evidence to show that, you know, exams actually make us better doctors? So because of your feedback, the ABR explored potential alternatives. You know, we could still give the exam at test centers. We could give a real-time exam that you can do at home on your iPad with remote type proctoring. You could do an open book test also at home on your iPad. Or what we became familiar with over the last year was a pilot from the American Board of Anesthesia called the MOCA Minute model. So I'm going to talk a little bit about this model. It's web-based. It's not secured. It's actually testing continuous longitudinal items that you would do for, again, the purpose of continual learning. if you actually give an incorrect response, you will get immediate feedback and references. It's low stakes, and there is remediation mechanism, sort of a continual remediation mechanism if you have low performance. And what the MOCA Minute pilot did, it gave anesthesiologists the option of taking 2 questions per week. It's called MOCA Minute because each question was a minute. You can take it on your phone, anything that was sort of modeled on a smart-based technology, and then you would get immediate feedback. So if you opted in to take the question and got it correct, it would still give you the feedback and references, as it would do if you got it incorrect, and it kept track of your progress. If you did get some items incorrect, you might see them very soon in the future to kind of reinforce that you learned from the feedback that was provided. And the anesthesiologists actually loved the MOCA Minute model on their survey, and it didn't come out yet in their type of red journal, but they actually looked at those who were in the pilot versus those who were not, the scores on their exams, which are similar to the ones we give for maintenance of certification, and those that participated in the MOCA Minute pilot actually scored significantly higher on their maintenance of certification exam. So not necessarily proof that that makes them a better doctor, but proof that this type of continuous learning works. So what does that mean for you? Well, see my exclamation point at the end of this first bullet. You do not have to take an exam if you are meeting Part 3 in 2017. So to put that into layperson terms, because I actually fall exactly into this. So if you have to take an exam in 2016, you still have to take an exam. And that was me because I came out of residency in 1996. So I did take my exam and I passed, but that will be my last exam. And if you need to take your exam after January 2017, you do not have to. You will just kind of sit in a holding pattern until the ABR is ready to launch their version of this anesthesia MOCA Minute that we'll be calling ABR Online Longitudinal Assessment, or OLA. So again, do you have to take an MOC exam? Well, yes, if you were supposed to take it in 2016 or earlier, but no if you were meeting Part 3 requirements in 2017. So lastly, and I just let me just talk a little bit more on our potential ABR OLA. So we're trying for, and we're just starting on this process of developing items and sort of a timeline. We probably will pilot it first in diagnostic radiology sometime potentially in early 2019 if all goes well. But right now we're sort of getting our template ready for developing the questions and our teams to develop the questions. So if anyone wants to volunteer, please send your CV to Paul Wallner and we will highly consider you for helping us construct these items. Items are the fancy word we use for questions. And it'll be walking around knowledge, and like anesthesia, we will probably give 2 attempts per week, but we realize that all folks are busy, so we will make this flexible and give sort of a life for these questions, probably about a month, so that, for instance, I can never do sort of 2 during the week because I probably work 24/7, but maybe if I'm not at a meeting on one weekend out of every month, I can bank those 8 questions that were given the 4 weeks previously and sit down with a cup of coffee and go through them on a Saturday or Sunday. So we will have that flexibility built in. So onward to Part 4. So practice quality improvement, I think, before we simplified it and made it more relevant over the past year, was probably the most confusing component to all of the 4 parts of the maintenance of certification program. And previously, you had to have one project every 3 years and provide documentation on MyABR. And it was one of those plan, do, act, study type of projects where you would maybe look up, maybe I'll pick one relevant to me, I don't know, vaginal stenosis in my anal cancer patients, and was it any different if I provided them rigorous vaginal dilator education and they actually used it? And then I would have to sort of document all this in real time on the MyABR in MyABR dashboard. So we decided that that's fine, you can continue to do that, but perhaps we needed to make PQI more relevant to what we all do in our practices. So PQI activities now also count, and you can simply attest on your dashboard yes or no. But again, just make sure you keep some documentation for it in case you are audited. What it'll look like in the future, perhaps it could be some sort of peer evaluation, more to come on that. So let's give you some examples of now what we consider to be these new acceptable PQI activities. So if in your department you participate in any sort of quality or safety review committee, especially one that meets maybe 10 times per year, and you are actively involved and you can provide minutes that you were involved, that counts. If you participate in root cause analyses in your department and again can provide evidence that you're actively involved, that counts. Chart rounds, many of us, if not most of us, participate in weekly chart rounds for our departments, and again, if you do 25 of these per year and can provide documentation of that, that counts. Any active participation in submitting data to one of our national registries, that also counts. And we have more. You can publish a journal article on quality improvement or safety, and I've done some of these things before we changed it and just put it into my ABR dashboard, so hopefully that was okay, Paul. But so I guess I did it before we made it go live, and that counts. If you give an invited presentation at one of our national meetings on safety improvements or quality improvements, that counts. If you participate in conferences focused on patient safety, that counts. Or you're actively involved in patient experience of care surveys, that counts. So for instance, if you can show that you've had at least 5 safety-related questions on a survey and a minimum of 30 survey responses, even if it's like a hospital press ganey, you can count that, or you can double dip and count that. And we even have more. So if you're actively participating in your department or institution and getting accredited, that counts. What about clinical trials? So some folks that have the ability to put patients on clinical trials, if you enter 5 or more patients in a year, that counts. And honestly, if you can think of any reasonable activity that fulfills the spirit that we're now talking about in terms of relevant PQI activities, we will likely accept that. Just bring that up to us. So I just wanted to go over one other change that has happened, but just to make sure everybody understands that, and that's continuous certification. So before the last few years, basically, you almost had this kind of 10-year maintenance certification cycle, and honestly, of course I did everything, but I'm not sure a lot of folks prior to the last few years were really actively involved. And that's not the purpose of maintenance of certification. It's continual learning and professionalism. So it made more sense for us, as all of the other member boards of the ABMS, to really do a continuous certification. And this is more in line with hospital credentialing, licensure, etc. So what does continuous certification look like? So again, the old system was really kind of based on every 10 years. And the new system is, and forget the exam in red every 10 years because we told you the changes that are coming to that. You still have to have your license. The part 2 is really every year you need 25 CMEs, and 8 of these need to be self-assessments. And the part 4, we're not making it that you have to have a project every year, just every 3 years. And again, you're going to attest to these things, so just keep some documentation. So I think I went over some of the advantages already, but the nice thing about this is that we will remind you because we are with you in maintenance of certification. And if for some reason you're falling behind, we'll let you know, and you always have a 1-year grace period to catch up. So again, this is a 3-year rolling cycle. The first look back we had was March 2nd of 2016. So there may be a few of you on right now that got some notification that you're not up to date, or maybe all of you were. And we would look back from the 3 years before 2016 to make sure you had the 4 parts met. What it'll look like, because all of these things are public reported, again, not from the ABR, but through CMS. Certified, meeting requirements of maintenance and certification. You can be certified not meeting the requirements. You could be certified, as we went over, or Paul went over, on the sort of grandfathered lifers not required to participate, or you're not certified. So I just wanted to finish up going over really our future maintenance of certification. We really are trying to give a coherent, non-redundant, non-burdensome approach with common standards for assessing and reporting. And we want to make this relevant with this continuous learning overarching goal for our clinical practice. So in conclusion, we're hoping that you see that maintenance of certification has a sound basis in the literature, in philosophy, and in healthcare policy, that our requirements are not onerous to our diplomates, and hopefully that MOC will really become an integral part of our practice, our peer and external review, and healthcare reform policy in the future. And if you have any questions, you can feel free to email Paul or myself, but the maintenance certification has a help desk as well. And I have to say, when we're at national meetings and we have headquarter ABR senior staff with us, we get lots of questions there as well. And we're always there for you. So if you have any questions on anything, feel free to ask.
All right, thank you, Dr.
James is going to tell us our questions now.
Yeah, so just as a reminder to those of you who joined after we got started, in order to submit questions, go down to the chat section on the GoToMeeting drop-down on the right and select Send Questions to Staff. And then submit it that way. I can read it out. So our first question is from Benjamin Hinton. It is, what is the data that MOC improves patient care?
That's an excellent question. So I have to say we have some data from our general practitioners. We have no data for oncology, whether it be through internal medicine or radiation oncology. And the only recent data that we have, I mentioned for the anesthesia board with their online assessment program. I don't know, Paul, if you have anything to add on that.
One of the problems is that the ABR, the number of diplomates who are in maintenance of certification is relatively small but we see increasing evidence, and this is real data, hard data from the American Board of Family Practice, the American Board of Internal Medicine, and the American Board of Surgery, where they do have really much larger numbers of diplomates who have been in MOC, and they're beginning to demonstrate data that there is an improvement and a change in practice patterns.
All right, the next question is from Dr. Wilkinson. It is, will the MOCA type questions be subspecialty specific? Can you choose to do 30% of the questions in the main area of your practice, like the most recent MOC exam?
Yeah, that's an excellent question. So potentially we will get there, but probably to start, this will be a more general approach, and it'll be walking around knowledge. And I can give you, for an instance, so of course I always ask rectal or anal cancer, but sorry. So for instance, for anal cancer, I think we would probably want folks to know what is the general treatment of anal cancer in terms of the chemo agents used and the general dosing. But at some point, it's just because if the onus won't be on our diplomates, but on our volunteers to actually provide a pool of questions with the feedback and references to get this program started. So for that reason, it'll start in a general fashion, but hopefully as we build our pools of questions, we can again make this so that you can have some modular questions. That said, for those of you that have taken the maintenance of certification actual 200-item exam and have done the modules, those questions are quite a bit harder. If they had taped me while I was taking the GI modules during my exam, I think I may have been cursing at the computer. So something to consider, perhaps it's the walking around general knowledge that might be what we want to hone up on, because sometimes the more specific knowledge may be a little bit too out there. I had lots of liver transplant questions on my exam, and I actually didn't think of the relevance of that.
All right, the next question is, what is a look back if we have our first one of these coming up? Is it a formal process or something we do on our own?
No, well, you'll notice on your dashboard, and again, this is all new for all of us, if you have any of the parts in red when you log on to your dashboard, then you have not attested yes or no that you're up to date. So for instance, we're almost be up to date right now because we've passed that March 2nd, 2016 point, and the ABR would have notified us if we were not compliant in any of those 4 parts. So a year from now, March 2nd of 2017, the ABR will kind of keep track that we have a license. For the past year, we have 25 CMEs. Well, that I should say that we've attested yes to this because the data won't be in the dashboard. That we've attested yes to 25 CMEs, and 8 of those being self-assessment, and that we are up to date with our exams through the 2016 year. And then every year, the ABR will keep track, and if you're not up to date because you did not attest yes, they will let you know before you get to that March 2nd point. So sometime in the end of 2016, very early 2017, the ABR will send you emails or letters as it gets closer to say, hey, you're in the red zone for this. Please attest yes or no and do what is needed.
All right, and next question. When someone gets audited, over what time period is the audit, or how long do we need to keep records in case we get audited?
So as maintenance of certification is, this is continuous for life. So we always have to keep a current copy of our license, which we all do. We have to keep track of our CMEs, which we need to do for our licensure in hospitals anyway. The added part will be the self-assessments. So if you don't do it on your ACRO website, keep track of the self-assessments you do. The exam will go away, so we'll have that information about the online assessment when we start, and we don't have to worry about that for a couple years. And then you'll have to also keep track of a PQI every 3 years, or again, chart rounds or all those things. Just keep track. And if you don't have sort of a formal way that you keep track, we have on our website an example of a page that your chair can sign to attest that you've actually attended chart rounds or quality safety meetings, root cause, etc., so forth.
All right, and final question. Has the ABR considered doing subspecialty certifications like CNS or different disease sites beyond palliative medicine?
So I'll give you the short answer because I've not let Paul talk at all. We have considered it, but when you look at sort of the numbers of folks who request things, more often than not, it turns out to be sort of single digits on one hand. So that doesn't really make much sense for the cost and time it would take to create such things. But I mean, we do listen to what our diplomates tell us and consider everything quite robustly before making any decisions. But Paul, I'll let Paul speak. He's had a long history of taking these emails and phone calls.
Yeah, it goes a little bit beyond that, in that we are not allowed to offer a subspecialty certificate in an area of interest not offered as a formal fellowship by the American Board of Medical Specialties. And at the moment, there is no fellowship approved for radiation oncologists, for those individuals primarily certified in radiation oncology, except for hospice and palliative medicine, which we do have a subspecialty certificate, and pain medicine, which we also support a subspecialty certificate. So if there are areas such as stereotactic radiosurgery, SBRT, there have been suggestions about brachytherapy or pediatric radiation oncology, we'd certainly be interested in looking at those, but the first step would be for someone to submit a formal curriculum and a request to the Accreditation Council in Graduate Medical Education to develop a curriculum, a formal curriculum, and approval for fellowships. So it's a chicken and egg phenomenon in that regard.
And that said, and this was Paul's big baby here, we tried to do a certificate, just not even a subspecialty. We decided to take baby steps to see interest, and we tried to do a certificate in brachytherapy, and I'll let Paul describe it much further, but we anticipated a much greater response and engagement in it. Yeah,
it was a major disappointment for the ABR and for many of our brachytherapy interested colleagues, in that the American Board of Medical Specialties asked for demonstration projects for areas of interest in specialties that had primary certification that included these areas, but where there was evidence that increasing volume, impacted positively improved outcomes. And there was, in brachytherapy, there's definite literature, academic literature suggesting that increasing volumes improve outcomes. So we developed what we called a focused practice initiative in brachytherapy. We had indications from the American Brachytherapy Society and from ASTRO members that we would have several hundred participants, and ultimately we did not have sufficient number of participants to continue the program. So to suggest that we might have the same level of interest in SBRT, SRS, or pediatrics, I think is unlikely at this point in time. The other issue is there are a number of fellowships, and I put fellowships in quotes, in brachytherapy around the country, but none of them are ABMS or ACGME approved. So no one with an interest and a significant interest in brachytherapy has ever had enough interest to develop a curriculum and a formal program. They are essentially ad hoc programs.
These are all great questions.
All right, and that appears to be everyone's questions for now. Thank you both very much for taking the time to answer everyone's questions for this and going through all these different changes that are coming up. If anyone has any questions, you can send them to the ABR help desk like they mentioned, and this will all be uploaded to YouTube and placed on the website.
And again, I just want to ask if there are any folks interested in volunteering in any capacity, but especially for helping us develop some maintenance and certification online items or questions, please contact Paul or myself.
All right. I'm going to go ahead and end the webinar. I hope everyone had a great day, and hopefully you'll be around for the next one. Goodbye.